The sun rose over Earth, casting a warm glow over the bustling city of Silverstone. It was a day like any other, filled with the usual hum of everyday life. People rushing to work, kids heading to school, and the soft rustling of trees in the wind. But for young Alex, this wasn't just any ordinary day. Today, he was about to leave Earth behind for a journey that most kids could only dream of. He was about to visit an alien planet, one far from home, in the name of diplomacy. Alex was no ordinary child. He came from a family of heroes. His father, Commander Jackson, was a decorated war veteran, a legend in the human military. And Alex, as the son of such a man, was expected to continue the legacy of humanity's strength. Alex had always looked up to his father, who had taught him everything about honor, courage, and what it meant to fight for the greater good. His excitement was palpable as he waved goodbye to his family and boarded the transport ship, leaving Earth's atmosphere and heading to a distant world. The Galactic Empire had made a deal with Earth's leaders to send their young ones to various alien colonies for educational purposes, hoping to foster peace and understanding between species. For Alex, this was a dream come true. The journey to the alien world was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The ship he was aboard glided smoothly through the stars, the hum of the engines a constant, comforting presence. He sat by the window, watching in awe as planets, nebulae, and distant stars whizzed by. The vastness of space felt so immense, so full of possibility. He imagined the alien city that awaited him, tall spires of glass, flying cars zooming through the air, and a culture so unlike his own that he couldn't wait to explore. Upon arrival, Alex was greeted by officials from the Galactic Empire, who welcomed him warmly and escorted him to a grand building, where he would meet leaders from various alien species. The atmosphere was grand, alien dignitaries of all shapes and sizes mingling with one another, speaking in languages that Alex couldn't understand. But there was one thing Alex did understand. The world was beautiful, and the Empire was powerful. However, the joy of this moment would not last. The Empire had a dark secret, one that Alex couldn't have possibly predicted. The human delegation was there under the protection of the Empire, but that didn't mean they were safe. The leaders of the Empire had a plan, and Alex, though just a child, was caught in the middle of it. The Empire, fearing the growing power of humanity in the galaxy, decided that one life could be sacrificed to send a message that no one, not even the children of Earth, would be allowed to challenge the Empire's authority. Alex's death was swift and brutal. The alien general, under orders from the Empire's High Council, struck without warning. In a cruel twist of fate, Alex was killed in front of his fellow human ambassadors. The child, who had once been full of life and wonder, was gone in an instant. His body was left behind, a symbol of the Empire's strength. The message was clear: humanity would learn its place. The transmission of Alex's death was broadcast back to Earth, and the world was immediately plunged into chaos. At first, the news seemed like an unthinkable tragedy, but as the details unfolded, something much deeper began to stir within the hearts of humans everywhere. Anger, pain, rage. The death of one child was all it took to ignite a fire that could not be put out. News outlets, social media, and every channel on Earth were flooded with images of Alex's lifeless body, a stark contrast to the vibrant, hopeful child he had been just hours before. The world mourned together, but the mourning quickly turned to fury. The leaders of the Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for love and revenge. In cities across Earth, from the crowded streets of New York to the calm hills of Japan, the mood was the same. People could no longer sit idly by. Alex wasn't just a child, he was the future. He was the symbol of what humanity could achieve. And now, he was dead because of the actions of the Galactic Empire. Behind closed doors, Earth's leaders gathered in secret. The United Nations, along with military officials, quickly convened to discuss their response. Commander Jackson, Alex's father, was among them. He sat in silence as the world leaders debated their options. But he knew, deep down, that there was only one option now. His son had been taken from him, and the Empire would pay for it. There would be no turning back. The decision was made. The world would go to war. But this wouldn't be like any war humanity had fought before. This time, Earth would take the fight to the heart of the Empire. Earth's leaders had spent decades preparing for a moment like this, working on new weapons, gathering intel, and creating alliances with other alien species who felt threatened by the Empire's rule. Now was the time to act. Humanity's war machine roared to life. Military bases around the world activated, cloaking devices were tested, and soldiers trained for the upcoming conflict. The most advanced weapons in Earth's arsenal were unlocked, including eye-controlled fleets, planetary bombardment lasers, and robotic soldiers. Earth was no longer the weak, backwater species the Empire had thought them to be. Earth was going to make them regret ever crossing the line. Commander Jackson, though heartbroken, stood tall. He had lost his son, but in that loss, he found something far more dangerous: purpose. His desire for vengeance was all-consuming. He knew what he had to do: lead humanity's charge and ensure that Alex's death would not be in vain. The first strike was unlike anything the Empire had ever seen. Earth's fleet, cloaked and stealthy, appeared without warning above one of the Empire's most important planets. The Empire's defenses were caught completely off guard. The human fleet was small, but it was deadly. Earth's advanced AI systems guided the fleet's every move, taking out key targets with surgical precision. The Empire retaliated quickly, but their forces were too slow, too unprepared. Earth's ships moved like shadows, striking and retreating, never staying in one place long enough to be hit. In just a few hours, the capital of the Empire was in ruins. The Empire had made a grave error in thinking they could kill a child and escape the consequences. Back on Earth, the news spread. The Empire's capital planet was under attack. People cheered, not in celebration, but in the understanding that this was only the beginning. The death of one child had set a fire in humanity's heart, a fire that would burn until the Empire was nothing but ash. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message to the rest of the galaxy. Humanity was not to be trifled with. They had fought wars for survival, for freedom, and now they were fighting for justice. The message was clear: hurt one human, and the entire galaxy would feel their wrath. The spark of fury had been lit, and nothing could extinguish it now. The Galactic Empire would soon learn that the cost of underestimating humanity was far greater than they could ever imagine. The Earth was no longer a peaceful planet. The events of the last few days had ignited something deep within humanity. The whole world had watched, helpless, as the news of Alex's death spread across every screen. The images of his lifeless body, cold and discarded, filled the hearts of billions with a fury they had never known. People in every country were angry, devastated, and determined. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was a fight for their pride, for the future of their children, and for the very soul of humanity. It didn't take long for the leaders of Earth to take action. The United Nations, together with military leaders from every nation, met in secret to discuss their response. Commander Jackson, the father of the fallen child, stood among them, his face a mask of grief and anger. He had lost everything in a single moment. His son, his world, and the peace he had once known had been taken from him. And now, there was only one thing left for him to do: make the Galactic Empire pay. The meeting was intense. Leaders and generals argued over the best way to approach the situation. Some wanted to negotiate, to seek a peaceful resolution, but Jackson was having none of it. He spoke only once during the meeting, his voice cold and hard. "They killed my son. They will pay with their lives. There will be no negotiations." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of a man who had lost everything. Everyone in the room knew that Jackson was right. There was no turning back. Revenge was no longer a choice. It was a necessity. In the days that followed, Earth's military machinery went into full swing. The best soldiers, the most advanced weapons, and the most secretive technologies were all put to use. They didn't have the resources of the Empire, but they had something more: anger and determination. Every nation on Earth contributed to the cause, sending their best technology and forces into a unified effort. Earth's leaders knew they had to strike quickly before the Empire could respond. They also knew they needed to do this in a way that would send a message to the rest of the galaxy. Humans were not to be underestimated. The key to their plan was the use of cloaking devices and AI-controlled warships. The human fleet, small in numbers but deadly in capability, would strike first and vanish before the Empire even knew what had hit them. With Earth's military assets combined, they had developed new cloaking technology that was nearly impossible to detect. Ships could appear and disappear at will, slipping past enemy defenses with ease. For a force that was technically inferior to the Empire, this was their greatest weapon. Commander Jackson, now the leader of Earth's military campaign, stood before the fleet as it prepared to embark on its first strike against the Empire. He knew that this mission would set the tone for everything that came after. He looked over the faces of the soldiers, their expressions grim but resolute. They were fighting for something far beyond themselves. They were fighting for Alex, for all of humanity. The first strike came swiftly. The human fleet, hidden by their cloaks, appeared above one of the Empire's largest planets. The Empire's defenses were caught completely off guard. There was no warning, no time to prepare. The humans had already made their move. As the first human ship fired its weapons, the Empire's defenses fell apart in an instant. Ships exploded in fiery balls of light. Cities on the planet's surface were reduced to rubble. The human fleet moved like shadows, striking with precision and disappearing before the enemy could react. The Empire scrambled to respond, but it was too late. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. Each strike was a surgical blow to the heart of the Empire's power. The AI-controlled warships, with their advanced targeting systems, made it nearly impossible for the Empire to defend themselves. Human soldiers on the ground, using advanced cloaking devices, infiltrated enemy installations and sabotaged key infrastructure. They fought in the shadows, always one step ahead of their enemies. The Empire's forces were disorganized, desperate, and unable to adapt to the new kind of warfare that humanity had unleashed. Back on Earth, the news of the first strike spread like wildfire. People cheered, not for victory, but for justice. Humanity had made its first move, and the Galactic Empire had felt the sting of their wrath. But this was just the beginning. Jackson and his team knew that the Empire wouldn't take this lying down. They would retaliate, and when they did, humanity had to be ready. The second strike came 2 days later, this time against a heavily fortified world in the heart of the Empire. The human fleet had no intention of taking prisoners. Their mission was simple: destroy everything. The Empire's military was stronger here, and their defenses were tighter, but humanity had one thing the Empire didn't: resilience. The first wave of human ships launched a full-scale assault, overwhelming the Empire's defenses with sheer force. Meanwhile, small infiltration teams were deployed on the ground to take out key targets. They moved like ghosts, invisible to the enemy. The battle raged on, with explosions and fire lighting up the night sky. The Empire fought back fiercely, but their forces were no match for the humans' tenacity. The battle on the surface was brutal. Jackson led his soldiers into the heart of the enemy's stronghold, fighting tooth and nail to bring down the Empire's command center. The air was thick with smoke and dust. The sound of blasters and explosions filled the air. The soldiers fought with everything they had, knowing that each step forward was one closer to victory. But it wasn't without cost. Jackson lost several of his best men during the assault, including Sergeant Bonner, a soldier who had fought alongside him for years. Bonner's death hit Jackson hard. He had been like a brother to him. but there was no time for mourning. The mission had to be completed. As the Empire's defenses crumbled, Jackson and his team reached the command center. The alien general in charge of the planet was waiting for them, confident that his forces would be able to hold off the human assault. But he had underestimated the humans' resolve. Jackson faced the general in a brutal hand-to-hand combat sequence, each punch and strike fueled by years of loss and pain. In the end, it was Jackson who stood victorious, his hands stained with the blood of the general who had taken his son's life. The Empire's forces were routed, and the planet was in ruins. But the victory felt hollow. Bonner was gone, and with him, a part of Jackson's soul. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had made its mark, but the Galactic Empire was not easily defeated. Jackson knew that more challenges awaited them. The next strike would be harder. The Empire would not forget the humiliation they had suffered. In the days following their victory, Earth's leaders gathered once again. The news of their triumph had spread throughout the galaxy, and the Empire was beginning to feel the weight of humanity's wrath. Jackson's next move would be crucial. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity's power, and now they would learn that underestimating them was the last mistake they would ever make. Humanity was no longer the weak, insignificant species the Empire had thought them to be. The wrath of Earth had been unleashed, and the galaxy would never forget it. As Jackson looked out over the battlefield, he knew that this was just the beginning. The war had only just begun, and there was no turning back. The Galactic Empire had made a grave mistake, and now it was time to finish what they had started. The wrath of Earth would not be stopped, no matter the cost. The air on Earth was thick with the promise of vengeance. News of the destruction dealt to the Galactic Empire spread across every continent, igniting fires in the hearts of humans everywhere. Humanity had struck their first blows, but this was only the beginning. The victory against the Empire was monumental, but the leaders knew the hardest battles were still ahead. The Empire would not sit idly by and let a few well-executed raids determine their fate. They would retaliate with everything they had, and humanity needed to be ready. For Earth, this marked the beginning of a new kind of war, one that was unconventional, relentless, and driven by pure fury. The great powers of Earth, bound together by a shared sense of loss and revenge, formed a united front that quickly became the most fearsome resistance the galaxy had ever known. They had no choice but to fight with every tactic at their disposal, adapting to the Empire's superior technology by striking when least expected. The first wave of attacks had been direct and decisive, but now, humanity had to face the reality of an empire that was regrouping. The Galactic Empire's vast fleets and well-trained soldiers would never be caught off guard again. They would be watching, waiting for the next move. Commander Jackson, still reeling from the loss of his son and his comrades, knew that humanity had to be smarter now. They needed to learn how to fight not just with strength, but with strategy. It was time for guerrilla warfare. The human forces, though smaller and less advanced, now had a weapon the Empire couldn't understand: ingenuity. Jackson and his military leaders devised a plan to fight a war of attrition, striking in unexpected places and disappearing before the Empire could retaliate. The key to their strategy was speed, deception, and the power of surprise. Using cloaking technology, human forces could appear out of nowhere, launch a brutal strike, and vanish before the enemy had time to regroup. They would strike in the most vulnerable places: the Empire's supply lines, their communications hubs, and their research stations. These were the cracks in the Empire's armor, and humanity would exploit them relentlessly. The war shifted from large-scale battles to small, highly coordinated attacks. Elite squads of human soldiers infiltrated Imperial strongholds, planting bombs and sabotaging critical systems. In the vast forests of distant planets, they set traps for Imperial patrols, striking with lightning speed and disappearing into the wilderness before the enemy could respond. The Empire's technologically superior forces, unable to predict the humans' tactics, were increasingly frustrated. Their once pristine fleets were now harassed by these relentless guerrilla attacks. No longer could they enjoy the luxury of overwhelming numbers and technological superiority. Humanity was forcing them to fight on the back foot, and the Empire was struggling to adapt. Commander Jackson knew that every small victory would have a profound impact. Each successful attack against the Empire's infrastructure meant fewer resources for their war effort. Each strike at the heart of the Empire's supply chains delayed their reinforcements, weakened their fleets, and diminished their power. The more the humans disrupted the Empire's operations, the more they realized that their enemy's strength wasn't just in their weapons, it was in their ability to sustain their military machine. Take away that power, and the Empire would fall. But with each victory came a painful cost. The Empire was not going to go down without a fight. Every attack, every sabotage operation, and every raid against Imperial installations was met with brutal retaliation. Human soldiers were pushed to their limits as they fought against an empire that refused to give up. Jackson knew that he was asking his men to give everything. The soldiers weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their homes, their families, and the memory of those they had lost. In one of the Empire's most heavily fortified worlds, the humans launched a daring raid against a research facility rumored to be developing new advanced weapons. The operation was to be a secret strike, and everything depended on the element of surprise. But nothing ever goes according to plan, especially in a war like this. As the human assault team infiltrated the facility, a sudden alarm rang out, signaling that they had been detected. The Empire had expected an attack, and they were ready. What followed was a brutal firefight that could only be described as a desperate struggle for survival. The humans, heavily outnumbered, were forced into close-quarters combat as the Empire's troops closed in on them from all sides. Jackson, leading the charge, fought with everything he had. His training, his grief, and his desire for justice fueled him as he pushed forward, never stopping, never hesitating. The battle raged on for hours, and the Empire's soldiers, confident in their superiority, began to underestimate the human resistance. But Jackson's soldiers were different. They were fighting for something more than just victory. They were fighting for the fallen, for the innocent, and for the future. Their determination was unmatched. In the midst of the chaos, Sergeant Harris, one of Jackson's closest allies, was fatally wounded. As he lay dying in Jackson's arms, he whispered words that haunted Jackson for the rest of his life. "Finish it, Commander. Make them pay for everything." Harris's last words echoed in Jackson's mind as he watched his friend take his last breath. There was no time for mourning, no time to grieve. The mission had to be completed. The strike on the research facility was successful, but at a high cost. The human forces managed to disable the Empire's experimental weapons and destroy critical research files, but the cost in human lives was steep. Jackson knew that this war would not be easy. The Empire had the resources and the numbers, but the humans had the will. The guerrilla war was just beginning, and there would be no turning back. As the weeks went by, humanity's presence in the galaxy grew bolder. They were no longer the weak, helpless species the Empire had once dismissed. The Galactic Empire now saw them as a serious threat, a force to be reckoned with. Each small victory sent ripples through the Empire's ranks. The once mighty Empire was beginning to falter under the pressure. They had underestimated the humans' resolve, and now they were paying the price. Back on Earth, the people were watching their heroes in action. They had never seen anything like this before. Ordinary people, just like them, were taking on one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. The message was clear. Humans were capable of anything. They were survivors, and they would stop at nothing to ensure the Empire paid for its crimes. Jackson, though exhausted and grieving, stood firm in his resolve. His soldiers, despite the heavy losses, were fighting with a determination that only came from the deepest of wounds. They were fighting for each other, for humanity, and for the children they had lost. This war was more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for redemption. As the guerrilla war raged on, The Empire's control over the galaxy began to weaken. They could no longer count on their advanced technology or vast fleets to keep them safe. The humans had turned the tables, forcing the Empire to play a game they didn't know how to win. The balance of power was shifting, and the once unstoppable Empire was beginning to crack. But Commander Jackson knew this was only the beginning. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more losses. But humanity would not falter. They had taken the first step, and they would continue to push forward, no matter what it took. The war for their freedom had only just begun. The days were long, and the nights even longer. The war between Earth and the Galactic Empire was now an all-consuming fire. Every time humanity seemed to take one step forward, the Empire pushed them back with a force that seemed unbeatable. But despite the odds, the human resistance continued to grow stronger. They had learned how to hit hard, how to outsmart their technologically advanced enemies, and most importantly, how to fight back against the overwhelming might of the Galactic Empire. The spark of vengeance had turned into a burning fire of defiance. Commander Jackson, who had led the charge from the very beginning, stood in a command center deep within Earth's underground military complex. The screen in front of him flickered with information, maps, and updates from across the galaxy. Every message, every report painted the same picture. The Empire was struggling. They were weakening, and humanity was starting to show signs of success. But Jackson knew better than to think the war was won. Far from it. The Empire still had vast fleets, armies, and technological resources that Earth could only dream of. They could not rest on their laurels. Victory was still distant, but it was closer than it had ever been. One piece of information, however, caught Jackson's attention. A breakthrough. A new weapon that the humans had discovered during their raids. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It wasn't a bomb or a missile or some new form of advanced artillery. It was something far more dangerous. The human ability to hack the Empire's technology. The Empire, as mighty as it was, had one flaw: its reliance on advanced AI and robotic systems. These systems powered their fleets, controlled their battle strategies, and kept everything running smoothly. But what the Empire didn't realize was that their reliance on AI had made them vulnerable to human ingenuity. In their arrogance, the Empire had believed that their technology was infallible, that no one could challenge their machines. But the humans, driven by necessity and hunger for revenge, had found a way in. It all started with a single piece of intercepted data. During one of their guerrilla raids, a team of human soldiers had managed to infiltrate an Imperial communications station. The mission was meant to be simple: disrupt their communications, sow chaos, and leave. But what they found inside was far more than just a communication array. They uncovered a hidden blueprint, a diagram detailing the Empire's central control system. This system was the heart of their technological might, the AI that controlled everything from their weapons to their strategies. Commander Jackson immediately realized the significance of this discovery. If they could get their hands on this control system, if they could infiltrate it and manipulate it, they could turn the tide of the war. The technology that had once been the Empire's greatest asset could become their greatest weakness. They could disable fleets, hijack robots, and cripple the Empire from the inside. But to do that, they would need access to the heart of the Empire's AI infrastructure, a seemingly impossible task. Jackson knew the risks, but he also knew this was the break they needed. There was no turning back now. He immediately assembled a team of the best hackers, engineers, and soldiers Earth had to offer. They would need a plan, precision, and above all, speed. Time was against them. The longer they waited, the more the Empire would fortify their defenses. They needed to move quickly. The plan was risky, a high-stakes mission that required everything to fall into place. They would infiltrate an Imperial data center on one of the most heavily guarded planets in the galaxies, Zyros. The planet was known for its impenetrable defenses and massive AI-powered war machines. It was a place where no one had ever dared to attack. The Empire had made it clear that Zyros was their strongest bastion. the center of their military might. But Jackson knew that this was the only place where they could find the AI core they needed. The journey to Zyros was fraught with danger. The human resistance had no fleet large enough to mount a full-scale invasion. Instead, they used their stealth technology, cloaking devices, allowing them to slip through the Empire's defenses undetected. The ship carrying Jackson's team was small, almost unnoticeable against the vastness of space, a speck in the great expanse. Every passing moment brought them closer to their objective, and the tension inside the ship was palpable. As they neared Zyros, Jackson looked around at his team. These were the best of the best, the soldiers who had fought beside him from the beginning. Each of them had their own reason for being there, their own personal vendetta against the Empire. Some had lost loved ones, like Jackson. Others had been survivors of Imperial raids. But they all shared one thing: the desire to make the Empire pay for their crimes. "I know this mission is dangerous," Jackson said, his voice steady, though his mind raced with the possibilities. "We may not all come back from this, but what we do here will change the course of the war. For every life we've lost, for every child taken from us, we will make them pay." The soldiers nodded in agreement. There was no turning back now. They had come too far to fail. Once they arrived on Zyros, the team split into smaller groups to carry out the plan. Some would infiltrate the data center and disable the outer security, while others would move in to extract the AI core. Jackson's group would act as the final line of defense, ensuring that the mission succeeded, no matter what it took. The initial phases of the mission went according to plan. The human forces, using their cloaking technology, slipped past the outer defenses of Zyros. The Empire was unaware of their presence, their systems unaware of the human forces moving through their planet like shadows. But as they got closer to the core of the Empire's operations, the security tightened. The AI-controlled defenses became more alert, more deadly. The closer they got to their objective, the more dangerous the mission became. As they breached the final layer of security, disaster struck. The Empire had anticipated the possibility of an attack and had set a trap. The data center was not as defenseless as they had hoped. The team was caught in a deadly crossfire as Imperial war machines, massive robotic sentinels, emerged from the shadows. The battle was fierce. Human soldiers fought with everything they had, but the odds were overwhelming. Jackson watched as his soldiers fought bravely, but one by one, they fell. The Empire's forces were too much. The AI-controlled war machines were relentless, their firepower unmatched. It seemed as if the mission had failed, but in that moment, something unexpected happened. The tension in the room was palpable. The crew knew the risks. They knew the cost. But they also knew the stakes. This was a fight for their future, for their freedom, and for their very existence. And they were willing to sacrifice everything for it. As the fleet set course for Zoreth, Jackson stood at the helm of his command ship, staring out at the vastness of space. The stars seemed to stretch on forever, each one a distant beacon of hope or despair. The silence of the void pressed in on him, but it was a silence he could handle. He had faced death countless times, but this felt different. This felt like the end of a chapter, the final page of a story that had begun with loss and despair, but would end with victory or defeat. The journey to Zoreth took days, and during that time, the resistance forces prepared for the assault. The human fleet was smaller than the Empire's, but it had something the Empire didn't: heart. The soldiers, engineers, and pilots had been fighting for so long that they had learned to adapt, to think on their feet, to use every bit of their technology and skill to stay one step ahead of their enemies. The Empire relied too much on its AI and robotic armies. Humanity relied on its people, on their creativity and resourcefulness. When the fleet arrived at Zoreth, the Empire was ready. Their vast defenses surrounded the planet like a wall, and their ships filled the skies. They had expected this. They had been preparing for humanity to strike at their heart, but they weren't prepared for what came next. The human fleet, using the cloaking technology that had allowed them to infiltrate Zyros, moved in undetected. They were a ghost, a shadow in the void, slipping past the Empire's defenses as if they didn't exist. The Empire's sensors were blind, unable to detect the incoming assault until it was too late. The first wave of human ships emerged from their cloaks, unleashing a barrage of missiles and energy blasts that struck the Empire's defensive grid with devastating force. The Empire's response was immediate. Ships fired back, their lasers tearing through the void. But the human fleet was nimble, maneuvering quickly, dodging incoming fire with expert precision. The Empire's massive ships were slower, their movements predictable. Humanity was the smaller force, but they were faster, more agile, and relentless. The battle raged on for hours. Space was filled with explosions, the sounds of war echoing through the void as missiles collided with shields, and laser beams lit up the darkness. Jackson's ship moved with purpose, directing the attack with precision. The Empire's forces were reeling, their defenses crumbling under the relentless assault. On the ground, the human soldiers were not idle. The moment the space battle began, Earth's elite forces launched a series of coordinated strikes on Zoreth's surface. Special ops teams infiltrated key military installations, sabotaging equipment and planting explosives that would cripple the Empire's ability to respond. The human resistance had learned how to fight in space, but they were also masters of ground warfare. They fought with everything they had, knowing that this would be their last chance to make a difference. As the battle continued, Jackson's heart raced. The Empire was beginning to falter, their once impenetrable defenses now exposed. But the final challenge was still ahead. The Imperial Palace, the heart of the Empire's power. It was there that the final blow would need to be struck. Jackson led the charge toward the palace, his team moving swiftly through the ruins of Zoreth's capital. Every corner, every alley was a battleground. The air was thick with the sound of gunfire, and the ground was littered with the bodies of both human and Imperial soldiers. But Jackson pressed on, knowing that the end was near. They were getting closer. The palace gates loomed ahead, guarded by the Empire's last line of defense. Massive robots and armored soldiers stood ready to fight to the death. But humanity had come too far. They had endured too much. They would not stop now. With a final, deafening roar, the human forces broke through the gates, storming into the heart of the Empire. The battle inside the palace was fierce, but it was only a matter of time before the Empire's leadership would fall. As the last Imperial forces were overwhelmed, Jackson stood before the throne room, breathing heavily, covered in the dust of battle. The war was over. The Empire had been defeated. Humanity had won. But as he looked around at the carnage, Jackson couldn't help but feel a bittersweet victory. The cost had been high. So many had fallen, but the war was over. The final assault had succeeded, and Earth had secured its future. The final battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The Empire had been struck hard. Their command had fallen, their fleets shattered, and their capital, Zoreth, was now in ruins. But the Galactic Empire was vast, and its reach extended far beyond its homeworld. Though the human forces had won the battle on Zoreth, they knew that to truly end the war, they had to destroy the very heart of the Empire. The true destruction of the Empire would come not from military victory alone, but through a force far greater, human resolve. It was time to set fire to the Empire. Jackson stood aboard his flagship, the Resolute, staring at the communications screen in front of him. The victory on Zoreth had been just one step. They had crippled the Empire's command center, but there were still countless worlds under the Empire's iron grip, and the Empire would not fall quietly. The destruction of Zoreth was a symbolic victory, but Jackson knew it wasn't enough. The Galactic Empire had built its power over centuries, and it wouldn't be eradicated by a single battle. He had a plan, a final strike that would reverberate across the galaxy and send the message that Earth was not to be underestimated. The message has to be clear, Jackson muttered to himself, more to reassure himself than to anyone else. His crew, all battle-hardened and resolute, watched him silently. They had won. The hard part was over. Or so it seemed. The Galactic Empire needs to feel the consequences of their actions, General Martinez said, her voice steady. They've taken too much from us. Too many lives lost. Too many innocent people slaughtered. It's time we take that fight to their doorstep. Jackson nodded. The time for mercy had passed. The Empire had shown no hesitation in its cruelty. They had killed a child, a human child, and that was a line that could never be crossed. Earth had suffered unimaginable losses, and now it was time for retribution. This wasn't just a battle. It was a statement. Jackson's plan was simple, but it was going to be a difficult and dangerous mission. The human fleet, though battered, had been reinforced. Their intelligence had confirmed that the Empire's remaining leaders were scattered across the galaxy, hiding in fortified bunkers on various planets. The Empire had used its vast resources to spread its influence far and wide, but now those resources would be their undoing. The humans had a weapon, an ancient Earth weapon, that could burn through the Empire's defenses like fire through dry grass. They called it the Phoenix Protocol. The Phoenix Protocol was an ancient weapon of mass destruction, designed long before the war to be the ultimate fail-safe in case Earth was ever cornered. It was a device that could release a powerful wave of energy, a wave so intense that it could destroy entire planets, systems, and cities. The Empire had always thought of humanity as weak, as backward, and had ignored the potential for such a weapon. But now, the weapon would be the key to humanity's victory. Earth had built it in secret, hidden from the Empire's prying eyes, and now it was ready to be unleashed. Jackson and his team had spent days preparing the launch. The Phoenix Protocol required a large fleet to carry out, and the risks were immense. If it failed, it could result in catastrophic consequences. But if it succeeded, the Empire would crumble. No force in the galaxy would be able to resist the kind of destruction it would bring. The plan was set into motion. The fleet, led by Jackson's flagship Resolute, departed for the first target, the Empire's stronghold on the planet Xeros. Xeros was a heavily fortified world, home to one of the most critical Imperial military bases. It housed several of the Empire's remaining fleets and production facilities, and its destruction would be a significant blow to their ability to retaliate. As the fleet approached Xeros, the tension in the air was thick. Every crew member knew the gravity of the mission.